The tragedy.
I regret that it wasn't me instead of Greg.
The scandal.
There was no explosion. The astronauts were medically alive for 2 minutes and 45 seconds after the shuttle broke up.
Obviously a major malfunction.
The shame.
They placed the remains in plastic garbage bags and put them in large plastic trash cans and put the lids on them.
Today, the shocking expose of the Challenger disaster and the disgraceful cover-up by NASA.
Maybe they did have a reason to conceal the bodies.
If NASA had wanted to find the crew capsule, NASA could have found the crew capsule.
They went to great lengths to prevent the accident investigation.
But NASA could not prevent our investigation. And now, finally, we have the unspeakable answers to the unaskable questions. Why did it take NASA 6 weeks to find the bodies of the astronauts? Why did NASA prevent the coroner from doing autopsies? And could the astronauts have been saved?
All you want is a chance, and the shuttle crew had no chance whatsoever.
The tragedy, the scandal, and the shame of the Challenger cover-up. Up front today, a special report that, in our opinion, leaves little doubt that our space agency, NASA, has apparently covered up the whole truth about the Challenger disaster. A cover-up that's been going on now for more than 5 years. Our exclusive investigation reveals that NASA kept hidden from us details about the deaths of the 7 astronauts, 7 of the best and brightest of our fellow citizens. Our senior correspondent, Krista Bradford, tells us that NASA concealed not only information, but the mortal remains of the astronauts themselves, and in so doing, may even have broken the law.
Thanks, Geraldo. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster is seared into the minds of most Americans. Most of us were not here at Cape Canaveral, but most of us remember where we were. Most of us remember watching in horror. Not since President Kennedy was assassinated had we seen such a televised national tragedy, and perhaps not since the Kennedy assassination had we been so deprived of the truth.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
NASA was trying to create a public impression that was contrary to the facts, and I believe that qualifies as a cover-up.
Good roll program confirmed.
It's got to be
Now heading downrange.
an obstruction of justice. I would think of an enormous proportion.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally.
It's not so much this keeping it secret that's bothered me, it's the fact that it happened. That I, along with most of the other people there, let it happen.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
On January 28, 1986, 73 seconds into flight, the Space Shuttle Challenger did not explode, and its 7 astronauts did not die instantly.
Obviously a major malfunction.
I was just numb. I just had, there was no feeling at all.
I regret that it wasn't me instead of Greg. He had so much that he was looking forward to.
Astronaut Greg Jarvis's father, Bruce, and his wife, Ellen, believe that NASA's top management has made a lot of mistakes. One was not keeping them informed. Did they tell you first, in fact, that they had died?
No, nobody ever told me that.
Did NASA tell you how they died?
No, nobody ever told me that.
Should NASA have been more forthcoming with this information?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
NASA lives on its myths, and one of the myths is that this was a nice, clean accident where everything just exploded and the astronauts died instantly and never knew what hit them. And I don't find that particularly comforting, but NASA apparently does. And they went to great lengths to prevent the accident investigation, finding out the real details of how the astronauts died and why they did.
Robert Holtz is one of 13 presidential commissioners who investigated the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. What two impressions did NASA leave about the accident that were misleading?
There was no explosion. The shuttle broke up from aerodynamic forces, and the astronauts were medically alive for 2 minutes and 45 seconds after the shuttle broke up.
Until when?
Until the impact on the sea.
Pilot Mike Smith uttered the astronaut's last known words, uh-oh, an extraordinary understatement considering what lay ahead and what came before. His friend and his widow's attorney, Bill Moretti.
Picture that everyone in America has seen of the crew walking out, headed toward the launch. I can look at the face of Mike Smith, and I knew the man well enough to know that he didn't like what was going on at all. No competent pilot would have liked what was going on.
Was he concerned about the cold weather?
He obviously was.
Freezing temperatures stiffened the O-rings on the right solid rocket booster, triggering the burn-through and the destruction of Challenger. But the crew cabin survived the breakup, and so too did the astronauts. Key evidence, the personal egress air packs, so-called PEEPs.
3 PEEPs boxes were recovered, one of which belonged to Mike Smith. They were turned on. They had to have been turned on by people who were conscious. Those PEEPs boxes had lost some of the air that was in them. And that air was the amount of air that the people who had them would have breathed from the time of moments after the explosion to the point when the craft hit the ocean. NASA was sensitive to the fact that it could be sued. NASA saw the possibility of being held liable.
And do you think that's one of the reasons why they have never to this day said that they were alive till they hit the water?
I know that that's why they did not say it. One of the reasons they did not say it during the course of the litigation.
Can you imagine the terror if they really were alive? And as if that was not horrifying enough, the bodies of these heroes lay underwater unrecovered for 6 weeks. And what happened when the remains were finally found?
They placed the remains in plastic garbage bags and put them in large plastic trash cans.
We'll tell you about that and other NASA outrages when we return in a moment with more of the Challenger cover-up. You have just seen evidence that suggests that the 7 Challenger astronauts were actually alive during the 12-mile free-fall plunge to their doom. In fact, NASA's own internal investigation seems to corroborate that depressing conclusion. According to 3 of our sources, NASA edited its own findings, then publicly stated there was no way to determine the exact instant of death. But just how far was NASA willing to go in its cover-up? Here again is Krista Bradford.
Just a few days after the accident of the Space Shuttle Challenger, the U.S. Coast Guard claims it told NASA where it thought the crew compartment was and came within a mile of its exact location, classified target number 67. But NASA still took 6 weeks to locate the crew cabin. Do you believe there was an unnecessary delay in the retrieval of the remains?
I don't see how you could argue that there wasn't. It seems very obvious. The radar and the telemetry told everybody almost precisely where the crew capsule had hit the water.
What this involves is the destruction of evidence. This is an incredible charge you're making against NASA.
For however it may be characterized, it's an obvious fact. If NASA had wanted to find the crew capsule, NASA could have found the crew capsule.
Does Jane Smith hold that same opinion?
I can't speak for her, but I think you can reasonably assume that she does.
His charge is based only on circumstantial evidence, but it doesn't seem so hard to fathom when confronted with what NASA did next. The USS Preserver brought the first astronaut remains here into Port Canaveral shortly before 9 p.m. on March 8th. Then, after midnight, NASA made a decision. According to one source, a very bad decision.
Once the ship docked and it became apparent that there were remains on board, they had taken some extraordinary measures to mask that fact from the other folks at the port and the news media.
This man works for NASA and was there when the astronaut remains were recovered. We have confirmed his account with 2 other NASA eyewitnesses.
They placed the remains in plastic garbage bags and put them in large plastic trash cans and put the lids on them. They felt that the appearance of those on deck would not arouse any suspicion.
Unlike caskets or...
Right, which should have been metal recovery boxes with flags on them.
This is upsetting to you.
Well, it's dredging up some things that are hard for me to deal with. The decision was made, which was not a very popular decision that night, to take the remains to Patrick Air Force Base. It caught everybody by surprise, and so the remains in the trash cans were placed in a Navy pickup truck and driven down the highway about 20 miles to Patrick Air Force Base.
Were you worried about that drive?
Yeah, all I could see in my mind was this pickup truck being involved in an accident and things being scattered all over the roadway. It was a tough time. I mean, these folks were what we consider our heroes, and to treat them like basically a little trash and garbage, like we were ashamed of them, was very upsetting.
But NASA wasn't just worried about the news media, it was worried about the county medical examiner, former assistant ME of Brevard County, Dr. Ronald Reeves.
Maybe they had some reason to be concerned. Maybe they did have a reason to conceal the bodies and try to sneak from one place to the other.
Dr. Reeves fought NASA to do what he considered to be his job, a forensic pathologist who has conducted more than 2,000 autopsies.
That we had a legal obligation and responsibility to do the investigation. It wasn't something we wanted to do. It was something we felt we were required to do.
Didn't you get suspicious at all? Here was all this pressure on you not to conduct the autopsies.
Yes, there's no good explanation other than the fact that NASA or some person or authority had decided that they did not want an independent evaluation or determination of what actually happened.
Right after the Challenger accident, the medical examiner's office printed a special edition of the Florida statute. Anybody disputing its jurisdiction could simply look it up. But that didn't seem to matter. NASA had the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology conduct the autopsies, and the results were sealed.
I think when you have an assertive attempt to keep people from doing their jobs, which could not be for any purpose other than determining the truth of an investigation, that one of the concerns you have to have is that there's a cover-up. Somebody's trying to hide something.
So why did NASA go to all this trouble? We wrote and called repeatedly requesting an interview. NASA's first response, everything that can be said has been said. Then NASA suggested we contact the Presidential Commission, which investigated the Challenger accident. So we did. If a commercial airliner went down, there would be a full investigation. That would include examining the remains and personal effects. Was that done in this instance?
No, it wasn't.
Does that bother you?
Yeah. Anything that was unprofessional in the way they handled the accident investigation bothers me, because it indicates that there may be some things that you could find out for future safety considerations that are being left unexplored.
One point I want to make clear, NASA has since responded to our request for an interview. We just have received this letter. I'll tell you all about it as we go on. Another point we'll be considering, could the astronauts even have survived this disaster? Some say they might have, if at least they had been given that chance. We'll be right back.
I was absolutely outraged that they were not provided with standard proper safety equipment.
I'll always hold NASA responsible for that one.
How the astronauts were locked in a death trap when we continue with the Challenger cover-up. We all know that in life accidents happen, but was the death of our 7 astronauts an inevitability? Believe it or not, some experts claim the 7 could have survived the fire in the sky if only NASA had given them a way out. Krista Bradford continues her special report.
The Presidential Commission, which investigated the Challenger accident, told us what happened to the shuttle, but not what happened to the 7 astronauts. Commissioner Holt's charges, NASA covered up.
What gave NASA the right to withhold information from the public and from the press and from you, the investigators?
Well, they have no right. It's just what some people would call just brass.
Another commission investigator who tried to find out what happened to the astronauts filed a report listing evidence that NASA did not provide, evidence he believed pertinent to the prime mandate of the commission. Reporters also tried to find out. The New York Times, Orlando Sentinel, Concord Monitor, Associated Press, and United Press International all fought NASA and lost. The court ruled the astronauts and their families' personal privacy must be protected.
Did the families ever ask that the autopsies be sealed?
I'm not aware of that being asked.
Did the families ever ask that all these steps be taken to withhold information that had to do with what happened to the astronauts?
Not in the case of the Smith family, at least.
Ironically, NASA denied the Smith family the same evidence it had been denying everyone else on their behalf, information on how the astronauts died and whether they could have survived.
All you want is a chance, and the shuttle crew had no chance whatsoever.
NASA didn't give them that chance.
No, that's right, and deliberately didn't give them that chance.
Was there an escape system on the Challenger?
No,
Why not?
because they decided it wasn't necessary.
Could the astronauts have survived if there was an escape system?
Absolutely. I mean, 2.5 minutes, actually it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds, is a lifetime in the test pilot business.
Do you believe he didn't have to die?
Not like he did go. I'll always hold NASA responsible for that one.
In addition, some charge NASA violated its own charter, which states one of NASA's main functions is to release as much information about its activities as possible. The President of the United States of America is supposed to make sure NASA does that.
I don't think anybody in the upper echelons of NASA has read that act in the last 20 years.
But I would imagine you still have some feelings of anger at NASA.
I guess it's more a diminution of faith. They don't have my respect like they used to before I knew what went on. I feel as though I've been hoodwinked.
In 1986, we were not prepared for Challenger, for the tragic loss of all the astronauts and of the school teacher. In 1991, NASA assures us that that is all behind us now.
But is it? Not according to some experts. The tragic lesson NASA has still not learned. When we return in a moment. Welcome back. Joining us now is Krista Bradford. She, of course, is the special reporter who brought us the report on the Challenger cover-up, and a fine job it was also, Krista. We just received this letter from NASA signed by a Mark Hess. He's the Public Affairs Officer for Spaceflight. Let me just briefly quote from it. We feel there's nothing new which can be added to this subject, nor anything to be gained by contributing to your program. They say this in the context of refusing to give us an interview either live or on tape. Tell us, review for us very briefly, what is new?
That NASA intentionally withheld information from the public, the press, from reporters, and even from family members, all the while stating that they were doing this to protect family members. So I do believe this is new information, and I find it curious that NASA didn't even want to meet to discuss this.
Do you think that the cover-up continues?
Obviously, this is your average business-as-usual response from NASA. They don't even address the issues that we raised in the story.
We also have just uncovered this document which indicates that NASA knew or should have known about the problem with the so-called pressure seals that, of course, the cause of the disaster that claimed the lives of the 7 astronauts. Why hasn't this document been made public before?
It was obtained through the process of discovery in a lawsuit that was filed by Bill Moretti on the behalf of the Smith family. And so this document apparently was not obtained by the Presidential Commission, which found that NASA high management did not know about the O-rings. This was a meeting that took place at NASA headquarters about the O-rings. If it's at NASA headquarters, you would imagine that the highest ranking people at NASA would know about the O-rings.
Sure. Dated 19 August 1985, fully 6 months before the disaster. So how are they going to react to our report?
They're not happy about it, obviously, and I think the letter is an indication about how they plan on responding.
Well, let's bring much more to the people tomorrow about this letter and about NASA's response.